Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm really excited tonight because I've talked to this gentleman probably for the last year or so. And when you talk about, keeping the tradition of the TV series like Dallas alive, the movie Hocus Pocus, you name it, this guy has seen it all and he has done it all. He has a podcast of his own. He's a great human being, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. JoshEilberg. And Josh, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you. So
Josh, I think
it's different to go on to somebody else's podcast for a change.
Right.
Let them worry about the recording.
Exactly. So Josh, let me ask you, how far back would you say your love for TV series began? I mean, was it as a young kid?
Probably, yeah. I think I remember Dallas probably vaguely when I was 5. It didn't click for a few years after that, but I just remember everyone in the house was watching it, so I jumped in, started watching it, and anything to avoid going to bed.
Right. And let me ask you, Josh, were there any other TV series at the time that you really liked? I mean, the 80s, when you talk about TV, I mean, TV took off. I mean, there were so many TV series to watch. And then you talk about, nighttime soaps. Thursday nights, you had Knots Landing. You had Hill Street Blues against Knots Landing. And then Friday nights, you had the Dukes of Hazzard. Then you had Dallas. Then you had Falcon Crest. And then Wednesday nights on ABC, you had Dynasty. So, I mean, you always, and I think Monday nights you had Murder, She Wrote. So there was always a lot of nighttime drama that was going on back then. And I mean, in a lot of ways, nighttime drama really was a huge ratings hit for all three of those networks.
Absolutely. Back when there were only 3 networks, really, and you had to be in front of the television because you didn't have VCRs were kind of for the wealthy back then. Not everybody had VCRs, so it was 3 channels. You had to be in front of the TV when it was on. And I mean, you look at the numbers for Who Shot JR, the revealing episode in November 21st of 1980, and that was 80 million people in the United States alone. I mean, come on. You won't see that anymore with all the streaming and the different things. I mean, I don't even record on the DVR anymore. I go straight to Hulu for network television the day after. So
yeah, and I mean, what a tool! Hulu, Netflix, all those streaming,
Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, this
Prime. Yeah. I mean, it's unreal. But let me ask you this, Josh. I believe when Dallas first came on the air, it was on Sunday nights, correct?
Yes, Sunday nights, 5 episodes. And it was only a mini series at the time, and they were not even at the real South Fork that we know.
Right.
They were at the Box Ranch, which has since burned down, but the frame is still there.
Right. And Josh, with people like, this has been I wouldn't say a controversy, but for years, Dallas was always recognized as having 13 seasons. Now it's 14 seasons. And I think what they did was they made the mini series part of season 1, and then they, the main season became season 2, which should have been season 1, because for a long time they were recognized as being on the air for 13 years. Now, whenever you go to Prime to watch them or you buy the DVDs, there's always 14 seasons. So that was interesting because that wasn't always the case. That was something that happened in the 2000s where they extended it to a 14th season.
Right. And I look at it and go, well, the first 5 episodes did air during the 77-78 season. So
yeah,
it was a mini season.
Right.
And even Patrick and Linda, they say that the continuation, I hate calling it a reboot, there's Patrick. That's actually a painting from Mario de la Casa, who's doing the paintings for the auction at the event coming up at South Fork in a couple of weeks. And the proceeds are actually going to Cherie J. Wilson's Yellow Rose Foundation for MS research. But Patrick and Linda, they even say with the new series that I don't like calling a reboot because it was really a continuation. Those were seasons 15, 16, and 17, they called them in their minds. But even the number of episodes, some people say 356, but for syndication, they split up Conundrum. That was really 357 episodes. So
Yeah. And I figure since you brought it up, I will touch on it now. I was going to touch on it after. The reboot really bothered me, Josh. And what bothered me the most is the way they made the character Cliff Barnes. Cliff Barnes was not
I've heard
a,
that.
he was not what they made his character on the reboot. He had his, flaws, and him and JR went at it a lot. But Cliff had a heart. I mean, he was a decent human being for the most part. He was very good to Bobby when Pam took off. And him and Bobby, I believe he was Bobby's best man when Bobby married April. So, I mean, if fans didn't watch that Dallas series and they just saw this reboot, they would think that Cliff Barnes was a career criminal, and he really wasn't.
No, he wasn't. And the problem, I think, is that Cynthia Sidre, who was the showrunner for the new series, was brought in. Her background is crime drama, and TNT brought her in and basically used the brand of Dallas to give to her and put some crime drama on under a well-known brand. So it didn't actually go the way it was supposed to. Of course, Larry passing didn't help either. So, and then the head of the network changed, and he wasn't a Dallas person. So out you go.
Yeah. Talking about Dallas and the history of the Ewans, it's interesting because I look at, what JR's character did to Gary and the way he treated him and stuff. And Jock may not have always been the best father to Gary, but I know firsthand that Jock would never condone the way JR treated Gary behind the scenes, like where Jock wasn't around. Jock wanted Gary to be tough, but by no means did Jock ever want Gary off that ranch. I mean, he deep down, you could tell it bothered him that his son left, where JR, for whatever reason, just wanted Gary out of the Ewan family. That was interesting because I always wondered, had Jim Davis not passed away and Jock was on further, would Jock and JR eventually have a little feud over the way he treated Gary? Because I have to believe that eventually Jock would have realized that JR's intentions were not good when it came to Gary.
No, they weren't. And I've often thought about that. Of course, you wouldn't have had the battle for Ewing Oil, which is one of the best storylines in the series, Jock's will. But it's funny that Jock wanted Gary to be tough, but and JR always called Gary weak. Well, Gary's the one that actually moved out of the Mama's house.
Yeah.
JR and Bobby
stayed
in Mama's house. So Gary started his own life, so he was a little bit stronger in that respect, that he actually stood on his own, unlike JR and Bobby, who stayed with Mama.
Yeah. And it's funny too, when Bobby had passed away and Gary came back for the funeral, JR comes into the room and sees Gary and tells him he's happy he's here. And then 3 minutes later, he's saying how nobody could replace my brother, especially the likes of you two, Ray and Gary. So it's like JR just can't help being a jackass either,
No, this is true. He always was able to twist that knife in some ways, but Gary, slapped back at him. And even when he came back in 2013 for those 3 episodes, he it was a shame with Larry passing because they didn't have any scenes together when Gary came in. And Joan Van Ark, who came on, I had her actually on last week via phone, and she was supposed to be on for more than one episode, but because Larry had passed, they had to restructure it, and she got trimmed down, so that storyline got shoved aside, and in she came for 2 scenes, and out she went.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird too. Like Gary had come to Dallas obviously to help Bobby, but him and Val were having some marital problems, and then they just kind of get back together. But you never see them do a scene together, other than Lucy and her show up, and Bobby says, "Look who's here, Gary," whatever. But like it was almost like it was a forced reunion.
Right. And I think a lot of that was chucked out the window because of Larry's situation and the restructuring the whole storyline. They had to pick it up on the fly and write an entire who killed JR thing and JR's masterpiece and framing Cliff Barnes and sticking him in jail, even though Bum is the one that killed him in the end. So.
Yeah, it was definitely again, like I said, there were some good parts of that series, but there were parts I didn't like. I also didn't like how they kind of made John Ross somewhat like JR, because John Ross really, if you follow his character during the series run, he had a good heart, and he definitely, we talked about Gary. There was a moment where JR and Lucy are arguing, and he called Gary a wimp or whatever, and you could tell it bothered John Ross that JR was talking about Gary like that. So it was a little disappointing that they kind of made John Ross's character somewhat like JR, because I thought it would. Now, him and JR went at it in that series, but I thought it would have been a lot better if John Ross was more of like everything that JR should have been and wasn't.
Or you could have flipped it and had John Ross be more like what Christopher was and had Christopher be more like
JR. Yeah.
Kind of and then Bobby would have had to deal with the ramifications of his son being a jackass.
Yeah, which would have been different because Bobby was such the good old boy. He didn't, tolerate JR shenanigans. I mean, but at times too, Bobby looked the other way when it came to JR. You see that throughout the series, because Bobby, in some aspects, was very smart when it came to JR, and then other aspects, it was almost like he was clueless because he should have been smarter when it came to what JR was trying to do.
Oh, absolutely. And we just discussed an episode that we recorded last night where it was Bobby and Pam's divorce, and JR took Bobby, says he's taking him out to dinner, and then he had Serena show up with one of her friends, played by Tracy Scoggins, of all people. And Bobby knew right away that was a call girl. And so he was wise to JR when he wanted to be, but when he didn't need to be, he was like, oh,
Yeah. And it's funny about Patrick. I really, you definitely see what a talented actor he is, because I could never picture him going on that step-by-step show and being a funny guy, because all I ever saw him was a serious person, and he was so funny on Step by Step. I mean, they kind of made him like, not dumb, but at the same time, just always a happy-go-lucky carpenter, who loved his family and stuff. But he was really funny on that show.
Oh, he was. And what Patrick told me was that the reason they didn't want him at first, but the reason he got it was because Leonard Katzman sent over the blooper reel from Dallas. And if you know anything about when they're not rolling, Larry and Patrick are just constantly trying to one up each other with practical jokes and just shenanigans and stuff like that. So that ended up bringing him over, and Sasha Mitchell ended up over there too. And he was great.
Oh yeah. I mean, they really made his character funny. I mean, it was fun. It was interesting how two serious characters on a TV show could just be so funny. And I mean, Sasha especially, I mean, he kind of played, the happy-go-lucky Cody, but like at the same time, they kind of made him like he had like that surfer type mentality, kind of.
Oh yeah.
But he
was dude, we're gonna ride the wave.
Yeah. But I just thought that was great that Patrick got another series where he could, that way he wasn't just strictly remembered as Bobby Ewan. Now he's remembered as Bobby Ewan and Frank Lambert. So
right, and I kind of made a joke to him in Burbank when they had the Hollywood show last March, and there were at least 25 members of the cast of Dallas there. And I was helping Patrick at his table on that Friday night because his granddaughter couldn't be there to help him until Saturday. And he walks by me on Saturday, and he slips me $100 bill, and I said, "Is this Bobby Ewing money or Frank Lambert money?" And he goes, "Oh, Frank Lambert can't even pay his bills. He wouldn't be giving you money."
Yeah, that is funny. But let me ask you this, Josh. I thought about this too.
Hmm.
I know that the series ratings wise, it was still good, especially for Friday nights. That's what's really remarkable about the series is how well it did on Friday nights because most people go out on Friday nights. But I really felt,
Not us kids that had to
yeah,
were underage.
yeah, but I really felt for Dallas fans, it would have been best to end that series when Victoria decided to leave because it, to me, fans never got the closure with Bobby and Pam, and Bobby and Pam should have been together. And because she left, they had to kind of write her character out. She leaves Bobby because she doesn't want Bobby to see her, Bobby or Christopher to see her like that. I just think, in hindsight, they should have just ended it there.
Yeah, there is a point for that, and I can definitely see that. Bobby and Pam could have ridden off into the sunset finally at long last with Christopher, and JR has lost Ewing Oil for the government for his BD Calhoun shenanigans, but the network, they wanted to milk it and keep going, so we did not get that closure.
I think once Linda left, that's when the show really had jumped the shark because they obviously brought Sasha in to try to give it some more juice. They had Cherie, being more involved on the show, and they also had brought in, her name escapes me right now, but the character who played Michelle. So,
yeah, Kimberly Foster.
Yeah, Kimberly. So, I mean, they were trying different things, but you could just tell in that final season that show was going to end that season. I mean, there was just too much going on. I mean, the whole you and oil thing, like in the last few episodes, 1 minute, Bobby owned it, then the next minute,
Barbara Eden owned it, and then
yeah, and then Cliff and JR are partners. Then the next week, Cliff strictly owns you and oil. So I mean, they were.
And then Dusty comes and stops JR from getting Westar, and it's like, oh.
Yeah. So I mean, but in all seriousness with the series, I really believe the best seasons, in my opinion, were like seasons 3 through season 10. I don't know how you feel, but I just thought it was must-watch TV all the time, and they did a great job because I never thought when Jim passed away that show could really survive without Jock Ewan, and it did.
It actually set up some great storylines with his will and the battle for Ewing Oil and collateral damage, Walt Driscoll and Rebecca dying in the plane crash, and Mickey and the whole euthanasia storyline. So they definitely got some mileage out of that. And it would have been interesting to see how it would have gone if Jim had lived. Yeah. And if Patrick hadn't come back. They were planning on making Steve Forrest's character Jock, but Bobby comes back, you can't bring back 2 dead characters. That would just be.
Yeah, but they made you think, I'll tell you right now, until probably episode 11 or 12 of that season, I really thought he was Jock because, I mean, all the signs pointed to it. I mean, he remembered stuff that only Jock could remember. And I was really getting into it. And here's the problem with it, though. I think after him being away, I think at that point he was away 5 years. If they were going to do it, they should have done it like no more than after a year he was away. 5 years was too late.
A year, maybe 2, because of burns and recovery and stuff like that. But pushing it maybe 5 years was a bit much at that point. And they were gonna make him Jock, but then I think the fan reaction was that it was not, we can't replace Jim. Just leave him be. And it's like they tried replacing Miss Ellie with Donna Reed. Poor Donna, that whole situation. She had huge shoes to fill when she came in, and she did not. She didn't get the treatment that she deserved, and I think if she had originated the role, then people wouldn't have been comparing her, and she could have played somebody else. But she was in an impossible situation. Kind of reminds me of those award shows when the celebrity gets up to go outside to the bathroom or whatever they're doing, and they have a seat filler until they
Yeah.
come back. So Donna was kind of like a seat filler for Barbara. Well, Barbara recovered basically.
Yeah. And, the other part about it too, Josh, is, I see it on the different fan sites, and Donna gets criticized a lot, and it's really not Donna's fault. I mean,
No,
she came in to play a character that she, for all intents purposes, knew nothing really about. I mean, she's working too much to really identify with the Miss Ellie character. So she's just doing what, the writers and the producers are asking her to do. And I just thought I still to this day think it's unfair for fans to go after her. Go after the writers, but don't give her a hard time, because she was a phenomenal actress.
oh, she was. She was. And if Barbara hadn't come back, then unfortunately they probably would have had to kill Miss Ellie because Donna passed that following January. So it was like, then what are you going to do without Mama and Daddy in the house? Then all
Right.
hell's going to break loose because there's nobody to rein them in. And then where does Clayton go?
Yeah.
So
And Josh, I know the reaction was mixed, and I know to this day it still gets criticized for how they did it. But I got to tell you, in a lot of ways, making Pam dream that Bobby died was, in my part, was very genius, because how could you bring him back any other way, unless, like, you know they did something with his body and he wasn't really dead, but that would have not been realistic. And not that this was, but what other choice did you have if you were going to bring him back? So I thought, that was a great job by the writers to come up with that type of scenario.
they were bold to try something like that. And if they hadn't done that, I mean, they took a lot of flack for it and wiped out a lot of great storylines from the season before. But if they hadn't done that, would Bob Newhart have woken up into bed next to Suzanne Plachette and had his whole series be a dream? Would St. Elsewhere, which is another great show from the 80s that I liked,
Yeah.
would that have put the whole series in the
Right.
mind of little Tommy Westfall, played by Chad Allen?
Yeah.
There, and then I'm sure you've heard the stories about, well, if that all existed in the mind of an autistic kid, then all these other shows that touched St. Elsewhere in some capacity never existed either. And then there's a whole website devoted to how like 300 things to this day, even Law and Order, all come back to St. Elsewhere.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I mean, I did not like the way St. Elsewhere ended, because, you're watching a show and you're thinking about this great, friendship that Ashlander and Westfall have. And to find out, like, to this, it took me a long time when I first watched that scene to realize what they were doing. Because at first I'm like, okay, why is he a carpenter now? Why is Ashlander his father? I was young then. I figured it out in time, but I just felt for the St. Elsewhere fans who invested so much. They watched
6 seasons.
Yeah. Doctors, things like that. It was a little disappointing. They could have came up with a better ending than they did.
I mean, you think Dallas fans were ticked at having one season be a dream, then St. Elsewhere all 6 seasons, but Newhart got away with it because that was you did not expect to see Suzanne Plachette in the bed.
Yeah.
And I remember when Breaking Bad was going off the air, I said, what are they going to do? Have Bryan Cranston wake up in bed with Jane Kasmerick from Malcolm in the Middle?
Yeah.
And they actually filmed that as a bonus scene on the DVD set with him waking up and Breaking Bad being a dream.
Right.
But Dallas was the first to do it. And I tried to think of, okay, so they have Bobby in the shower. And originally John Beck was filmed in the shower. So I think you cut one thing that they could have done in keeping that scene is you come back, same thing. She goes and opens the shower, or she's standing there. But Bobby in the shower was in her imagination. And maybe Bobby had been in a coma the whole year. I don't know. And
yeah,
just for people to not wipe out those storylines just to please those people. But
Yeah.
Susan Howard was not pleased, and that was her
Right.
final season.
And what I was not pleased about either was you brought up Susan Howard. I really liked the storyline where her character and Ray adopt that kid Tony, and that final episode of that season, Tony tells Ray he loves him, and you see Ray get emotional. And I think for Ray and Donna fans, it was disappointing because the next season they get divorced, and obviously Susan leaves the show. And again, like I know TV, there's not always going to be happy endings, but it would have been nice to see them stay together.
Yeah, and he ends up with Jenna Wade, and they go off to Switzerland after he beats the tar out of Brad Pitt in the barn, and and I'm sitting there watching that scene with him beating the tar out of Brad Pitt, and I'm going, wait a minute, Ray, you're a little bit of a hypocrite, because was it not too long ago that you were in the barn with someone that turned out to be your own niece, which they never wanted to talk about again?
Yeah, but that was a bad story. Anyway, you look at it, but I think at that time, they were experimenting with stuff, and they never had any plans to make Ray a Ewing. I mean, they did that more because Gary was in Knots Landing, and I think the writers wanted the Ewings to have another son. And they just
Steve was ready to leave at that point.
Yeah.
And Larry actually was the one that concocted that whole idea.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing too that is great about Larry. I mean, his character was despicable, but Larry, the human being, was a great guy because he really went out of his way for the people he worked with. I mean, he was a good friend to all of them. So that's the beauty of acting, because he was nothing like his character.
Right. And I remember being at a dinner in Turtle Creek during we were part of the media junket that went down in 2012. And he showed up with Patrick, Linda, and Brenda Strong, and for cocktails. And Patrick, Linda, and Brenda were going to leave for sushi or something like that. And they said, Larry, are you coming? And he said, no, we came here to have dinner with these people. I'm staying here and having dinner with these people. So the three of them left and he stayed. And I was sitting at his table, and after the meal, he went into the kitchen. This is class. He went in the kitchen, shook hands with, and thanked everyone that prepared and served the meal.
Yeah.
That's just, that was Larry. That's just the way he was. And even Linda held up a press conference in Pasadena once because she was out signing autographs for fans, and someone was recording this on their phone, and her handler said, oh, we got to be in by 3 because of the press conference. And she stopped him. She goes, these people out here are why I am where I am. Those people in there can wait for me. I'm going to finish with these people first. And she held up the press conference to take photos and sign autographs. So you wouldn't see that nowadays from a lot of these people, I don't think, but it's just speaks to their character and who they are as people.
Right. And Josh, we briefly talked about Hill Street Blues, but for quite a few years, and I don't know why, somehow the rumor that went around the internet was that Larry and Keo Martin, who played JD LaRue.
JR and JD, okay.
Yeah, that they were half brothers in real life, but that really wasn't true. It was just a rumor. Like somehow, I don't know how, they thought that was mentioned at one point, that they were half brothers, and I don't know where that rumor got started. Did you ever hear about that?
I hadn't heard that rumor.
Yeah,
Hill Street Blues is one I have to go back and watch because like you said, Knots Landing was on, so I was watching Knots Landing and not Hill Street Blues at the time. So
yeah.
So I'll find that on streaming. That's the great thing about streaming, is everything is out there now.
Right. So speaking of which, Josh, you do so many of these podcasts. You go to all these conventions, things like that. How did you start doing that?
Oh, this has been a year. And there's the one coming up in a couple of weeks, South Fork Ranch, October 25th through 27th. I'll mention that one in a little while. But first thing I went to was a fan source dinner for Linda Gray in 2008. And there was myself. Not myself. I was there, of course. But this was 2 weeks before maybe 3 weeks before They had the 30th anniversary reunion at South Fork, which was a disaster. But Linda was the weekend was for her to raise money to get her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And Cherie had come in. Patrick was supposed to come in, but he had a scheduling conflict. And there's Cherie. That's another one of Mario's paintings that are going to be up for auction. It's phenomenal paintings, phenomenal work. Who else was there? Christopher Atkins was there. Deborah Renard was there with her then husband, Paul Haggis, the director. Charlene was there with her daughter, Cherish. I was actually convinced, Larry was there, of course, with his wife. I actually convinced Omri Katz to go. That was his first foray into fan interactions and this sort of thing. And now he's running around doing the hocus pocus circuit. So it worked out well for him. But after that, I think I went in 2010 to Chiller in New Jersey, which Larry was at with Barbara Eden, Charlene, Linda, and Steve. Not Steve, Patrick. Steve. But and then I just started going to these things, and then eventually I realized they're too expensive to go to. So I said, why don't I start working at them, volunteering? And some of them are paid, some of them are not paid. So I jumped in, and it's just been snowballing ever since. And this year has been a very big year for them.
Right. And I mean, it's got to be so rewarding, Josh. And you've gotten to interview so many of these people, meet them in person. And you talked about having Patrick on, Linda. I mean, you're getting to kind of like relive your childhood and talk to people that you watched on TV every Friday night for so many years.
It's kind of surreal in a way, because I remember back in around 2012 or 13, I was on the phone with, I was at work, running a media services department at a college at the time, and a phone rang, and it was Audrey Landers. And I said, Audrey, hi, how are you? And she said, there's our Audrey. She said, I remembered that you lived in Boston, and I was I'm in town with my husband, visiting his sister who lived up in the area. Do you want to come down and have breakfast with us at the Four Seasons? I'm like, okay, sure, why not? So I went down, and then, it just kept going, and it's gotten to a point where it's more interesting for me to see the people that have never met them before and their reactions, because I go up and it's like, oh, hey, I have a lot of the phone numbers on the phone here because we have to set up interviews and stuff like that. And but just to see the other people, meeting them for the first time and hearing their stories, is actually kind of rewarding and fun too. But doing podcasts and stuff with them is, you have to really, I don't know if you've had this experience with people, particularly someone like the cast of Dallas, where how many years was it? 46 years. How many times have they been asked the same question over and over and over? And I really have to try to put twists on it somehow. I know in 2018 down in Dallas, I was doing one interview with Steve, Charlene, Linda, and Patrick, and I pulled a curveball on them. I said, tell me the best scene or storyline or performance of the person sitting next to you. And they stopped and they all looked at each other and then said, we've never been asked that question before in our lives. And then I had them do Larry, and Patrick started to cry, and I go, oh God, you're making me feel like Barbara Walters here. But so it's just interesting trying to come up with things for them to talk about that they haven't discussed before. And I've gotten to the point where this set of podcasts where we're doing to promote the event coming up in Dallas, and I've had almost everybody that's going to be there on, and I've stopped writing down questions, and I have bullet points, and I just let the conversation go. And Jack Scalia was on, and he went off into these great stories about being in New York with Cesar Romero, and Cesar Romero saying, I was standing in this spot in 1928, and Jack said, tell me everything about what this area looked like in 1928 and the people. And just his stories just went on, and it's better to let them free flow in the conversation that way, and just hear what they have, let them talk, and just not have scripted questions. And you really learn a lot that way, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great. It's great to see the turnout and the people that come to these things, because that the fan base is still there. You see it on these Facebook sites, the way people talk, and sometimes they get carried away. Like I said, it's a TV show, and
Mm-hmm.
that they're such fans of JR, and you get it, but like they tried to defend JR when it comes to how he treated everybody, and you can't do that. Like, you could be a fan and love a bad guy to a degree, but you got to be like sensible. But at the same time, the debates over it are great. I mean, it's great to see, and the fans are very passionate, and that's a
Right.
credit to
Yeah.
the writers and the actors, everybody that made that show so successful for 14 years.
And there's some people that can go a little far. They get fixated on a character, and sometimes they blend it. And if they hate a character, that might spill over into the actor or actress playing the part. And
Yeah.
I've heard stories and comments, and you'll post like maybe a birthday greeting for an actor or an actress, and somebody might pop in the comments and put like angry faces or vomit emojis or whatever, or something like that. And it's like, no, you're all right to hate the character, but this is an actor or an actress playing a part. And obviously they're doing a very good job if they're evoking that kind of emotion out of you, that you hate their character.
Well, it's funny you said that, because Paul Johansson, who's a longtime actor, he's also a writer. He was on a TV series called One Tree Hill, and his character, ended up murdering his brother. So I mean, his character was pretty despicable. But he had went to a fan convention, and he got heckled by like two fans who were calling him a murderer and stuff. And he just said to them, he said, guys, I'm playing a part. I mean, I'm not a murderer. I'm an actor. It's fake, the guy that he killed, he said, he's still alive. I mean, he's not dead. I mean, you guys, you can't take
I've
things.
got his number on my phone. I'll call him right now. No.
Yeah. So it's like, you are right about that. And one thing, you wouldn't think I would defend JR, but here's where, not that I'm defending him, but I could understand a little bit why he was the way he was. Because if you think about it, his father's favorite child was Bobby. His mother's favorite child was Gary. And even though him and Bobby, for years, they fought and they got along at the same time too, lived in the same house, Bobby's favorite brother was Gary. I mean, you see in the reboot that Bobby says to Gary, "You're always the one brother I could count on."
Right.
So, I feel like if you really examine JR, if he ever went, I would have loved to see them have him, go to therapy, because he was trying to change. And I think they would have uncovered that the biggest reason he is the way he is because he just feels like he's been rejected by everybody in his life.
And it's interesting you bring up therapy. I had on this summer Melody Anderson, who played Linda Farlow,
Yeah.
Dusty's wife. She was only in one episode, and she was at the Hollywood show in Burbank. And she's now a licensed certified social worker. So she counsels people and all that. And we've been talking behind the scenes about having her do a reoccurring series. It's gotten sidetracked because of all the events coming up and having the focus on that. But where she will come on and she's going to do a different therapy topic or something like that. And as a twist, I'm going to have her as a professional diagnose and analyze and diagnose the different characters on Dallas for their psychiatric issues and stuff like that. So
That'd be
uh,
cool. Yeah.
so that will probably come probably after the holidays, because this event ends at the end of October, and then you're right into Thanksgiving and Christmas, and people don't want to. I might have her come on and do something about the people and their depression during the holidays and that sort of thing, but we might hold that other stuff till January. But that would definitely be interesting to hear a professional diagnose these characters of what their root cause of their issues are and stuff like that.
Right. And Josh, they did like a movie once, and that was the closest we ever got to it. But I really would love to see them come out with a Dallas series where it revolves around Jack and Ellie raising their three sons, and you kind of get to see how JR became JR, and you get to see why Gary and Jack went at. Because the one thing that always disappointed me, and I don't know if it disappointed you, but we never really got to see Gary really be in that family dynamic. He came back and visited sometimes, but he was never really there. And I really would like to see, like, I think it'd be cool to show us, like, how Gary and Jack became so estranged. Why was Bobby the favorite son, and why did JR become JR? I mean, it would be cool for Dallas fans to see something like that.
And we bring this up periodically on the podcast. It could be kind of similar to the way Mad Men was set in the 60s. And there's that whole time period with the Kennedy assassination and that whole period in Dallas history too. And how could the Ewings have tied into any of that? You could run with that. You could show Bobby and Jenna because she lived next ranch over or something like that, and just see where all these the middle years, as they were calling it.
Yeah, it would have been. It would be cool. You never know. Like I always say never. But so Josh,
even if it's done in the vein of like Yellowstone, with these mini series being set in different decades, just a limited run for each decade up to, you could go all the way back to when Miss Sally's great or the grandfather, or he moved and set up the ranch there, and you could go through the Depression and just everything. It's a different series for each decade, a limited run, 8-10 episodes, and then
it'd be so much fun. I think it really would. I hope at some point, I have to believe down the road it'll happen, because they've done all these other things. Why not do this? I mean, it would be so cool. So Josh, let me ask you, we brought it up before. I'll start with this event that's coming up. Talk to me a little bit about the Ewan barbecue, because that is going to be Saturday, October 26th. Talk about that a little bit.
It's actually the part of a full-blown weekend, because you've been popping up a few things here, and starting on the 25th, they have a cocktail hour for people about 400 people who have spent $2,000, believe it or not. Well, 1978. You know the 1978 debut of the show. They've spent that pricing to get a VIP cocktail hour with the cast members that are going to be part of this weekend in Dallas. And it's quite the lineup of guests that you're going to have down there. Linda, Patrick, Steve, Charlene, Cherie, Audrey Landers, Kathy Podwell, Jack Scalia, Jenna Lee Harrison, Joan Van Ark is coming. Josh Henderson, Christopher Atkins is going to be there. Barry Corbin is coming, who played Sheriff Fenton Washburn.
Yeah.
Morgan Fairchild is coming, Jenna Wade #1.
Yeah,
and Josh Harris is coming, who played Christopher.
Right, and Barry also played another character in the reboot series, if you remember. He
AR's attorney who read the will. Yes.
Yeah. So And he was also in One Tree Hill. I brought that series up to you. He was also on that and very popular on that show. So
He's
that's,
been on everything. He was on
yeah,
Yellowstone.
yeah. He's a great actor. He really is. And that'd be cool to see him. I mean, you know, he seems like a likable person too.
I think he was on 911 Lone Star, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Uh,
been on quite a few things. I mean, he's a tremendous actor. And, you know, it's crazy to think that
he's
he's been,
84 years old
yeah.
on the 16th.
Yeah.
And they're going to have the cocktail hour that Friday night. And then Saturday is all day at South Fork starting at like 10 a.m. They're going to do, it's going to be kind of a cross between a Comic-Con and it's a real experience. So they're going to have meet and greets in different blocks, photo ops. They're going to have 2 panels on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. And they're hosted by William Keck, who hosted the panel out in Burbank. And then that evening, they're going to have an actual barbecue, which you brought up the flyer for. And they're going to have tours of the mansion for Diamond VIPs are getting tours with different cast members. So then there's a concert that night from Josh Henderson and an auction. You've been popping up some of the paintings. Then that's going to benefit Cherie's Yellow Rose Foundation, which they host an annual fundraiser every year, and 100% of the money raised goes to the MS research and care for MS patients and stuff like that. And it's funny that this is unfolding this way because when I had Cherie on back in 2023 to talk about her event that she had that April and April, I said, you really should do an event at South Fork one year and have the cast of Dallas there, and all the money raised would go to Yellow Rose, and you could have concert with different Dallas cast members that sing. You could bring in Audrey Landers, you could bring in Deb Trinelli, and then you could even have Mary Crosby there, and people could pay to have photos with her while she holds the gun and stuff. And then flash forward to Cherie getting booked into this event, and she said to me, "Did they take your entire idea?" And I said, "Well, it seems like they took parts of it. I guess I just think of these things quicker than average people." But and they're trying to make this an annual event, so there could be different Dallas cast members there next year, and different things going on, like a oil barons ball and that sort of thing. Trying to think of, oh yeah, so they would have different cast members. I know the 3Ds, Deb Bernard, Deb Trinelli, and Denon Simpson, they wanted to be a part of it. They were in Burbank, and I spent maybe, I really probably started this in 2008, reuniting them because they had drifted apart since the show had ended. And I saw Deb Bernard at the Fan Source, and then 3 weeks later, Denon was at South Fork for the event. I slipped her Deb Bernard's email address, and then they reconnected. Then I somehow got connected with Deb Trinelli, connected her back to Deb Bernard, and then all 3 of them got connected, and it took forever until this past March when I finally had the 3 of them on the podcast together. It was their first time that the 3 of them had actually connected. I mean, you would have had one with the other and another with another, but not the 3 of them together. And then they were at the event, and fans loved it. They came up, they had pictures and autographs. They were all right next to each other. All they were missing were the phones from Ewing Oil, so they could go, "Ewing Oil, can I help you?" But yeah, it's just quite an event they're putting together.
Yeah,
And
it really is. And I mean, I think anybody that gets that opportunity to experience that should take advantage of it because I mean, it's a once in a lifetime thing. And you know, it's funny you mentioned Deb Bernard. What a talented singer she is. I've had her on the show a couple times, and her and Sapienza. I mean, they do the duets together, and they are
Mhm.
just tremendous. So if you know Dallas fans, if you're a fan of Deb, and I'm sure you are, I mean, I would advise you to go on YouTube and check them out because they are tremendous. She's got a great voice.
And they just had me. They were just at the PNC Bank Arena opening for Darlene Love, who is 83 years old,
Yeah.
and the Fifth Dimension, where Billy Davis is 86 and Marilyn McCoo is 80. And the MC for the night was Cousin Brucey. I'm sure we've all heard of Cousin Brucey, the DJ from around the country, very famous.
Yeah.
And they had me come down. It happened to be on my birthday, so they had Deb Trinelli picked me up at the hotel. We went over, parked backstage. Deb Trinelli and her partner were there, and they had a birthday cake, and we were in the front row, and I was able to video their entire set, and that I'll put that on YouTube so people can see it. But you were right; she is amazing. They're amazing together. And Al sounds like Neil Diamond. If you were blind, you would have thought you were listening to Neil Diamond.
Yeah, it is tremendous. It really is. Um, and that's just the beauty of like how talented they all really are. But so let me ask you, Josh, what are any upcoming things that you're going to be doing? I know you're doing events like this, promoting them. They're on the podcast. You've had so many of the cast on your podcast, but are there any upcoming projects that you got in the works that we could look forward to?
Let's see. This coming weekend, that's Columbus weekend, in case this gets up later than Columbus weekend. Cast of Hocus Pocus, Omri Katz, Vanessa Shaw, Jason Marsden, Tobias Jelinek, and Larry Bagby. They're going to be in Salem for a weekend of stuff, and I'm actually going to be down over there Friday helping out with the costume party, and then the meet and greet on Saturday, and then they have a burlesque show on Saturday night. I'm not getting up there on stage, no. And then Sunday night they're having the screening here in Beverly, Massachusetts, with live commentary from the cast, and then we're having a wrap party after that. Obviously the South Fork event 2 weeks later. And then I think my last thing of the season is I just got signed on to do security and celebrity escort at Rhode Island Comic Con in first weekend of November.
Wow.
So I'll be doing that for the Friday and the Sunday, Saturday a family event. But and then I can collapse into the holiday season and do what I started last year as a new seasonal work, is line control at the mall where they do the Santa Claus photography. So that will be a good November, December thing. And then who knows what 2025 is going to bring? I don't know. More podcasts, of course.
Right.
Trying to reunite more Dallas people and bring them on the podcast. And then another round of conventions I think I have 90s Con in March down in Connecticut. You're down in the Connecticut area, I believe?
Yeah. Yep. I'm in Connecticut.
So yeah, Comic-Con, not Comic-Con, 90s Con. We'll have that in Hartford in March, the end of
Nice.
March.
Yeah.
And then I think Boston Fan Expo next August is on the table. So we'll see what goes on in between.
Well, Josh, I got to tell you, I mean, what you're doing, I think, is great. And for me as a fan, I always enjoy it because, you know, to me, that series was something special. And just the fact that you put all this work into it and you get these casts all together and you reunite them, it's a wonderful thing. And I applaud you for that. And I just continue to look forward to watching you do more stuff. I really appreciate it.
And it's funny you mentioned applause. Funny little side note. We had the whole podcast team in Burbank, and we were helping out with the 3Ds and Patrick and Al Sapienza. We went in for the group cast photo, which had 25 cast members in there. And as we walked in, the cast started cheering and applauding the podcast. And we walked out of there and we said, did that just happen?
Yeah.
And later I asked, was that night, Josh, we went out with Josh Henderson for the evening after the event. And I was talking to some of the cast later and I said, did that really happen? And they said, well, with all the work you guys have done, you're honorary cast members, and they consider us part of the cast, apparently, because the night before all the events started, we got invited to a dinner that was Charlene Tilton organized with Deb Trinelli, Denon Simpson, Josh Harris, and Omri Katz showed up, but they had Sue Cabral, who was the makeup artist on the show, Carrie Scott Nair, who was the prop master on Dallas and on Step by Step, and there was a production assistant there. His name escapes me at the moment, but the on-set tutor for Josh and Omri were there as well, and the stories they had to tell, and just to be included in that group, the stories they had to tell were just fascinating. And I think we're going to probably bring them on next year to talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff, because people want to hear more of that, because they hear all the stuff in front of the camera plenty over the past years, but behind the scenes people they want to hear from too. So it was just an honor for them to, very surreal moment for us to be considered among them.
Right. Yeah, it really is. I mean, and that's that's something that you always have on your resume and something that you'll take with you forever. And I really do, like I said, applaud the work you do. I think you do a great job. It's always fun talking to you. And, when all this stuff gets, done and stuff, I want to have you back on so you could talk about it and tell people what the experience was like. So I want to have you back on definitely, but I really do thank you for giving me some time today. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And if this event takes off, they'll be doing it again next year. I think they've already booked the ranch. And it's a little side note about the ranch is, I'm sure you heard that it went through the planning board or the zoning board or some group, but it's in the process that South Fork is over 244 acres, and the main part that we know is 44 acres. The 200 acres around, they plan on building housing. So,
wow, that's really,
it's a little sad, but as long as the main property stays that we know, then I can be happy. But I know you look at famous things from around the world, like the Alamo, and if you zoom out, they're really in the middle of a city or something like that, because everything's been built around a lot of these historic landmarks. But I don't think they can bulldoze the mansion, because apparently Larry Hagman's ashes are spread at South Fork.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great thing. Well, Josh, thank you again. Look forward to having you back on, and have a great time this weekend with everything you're doing, and just keep up the great work, my friend. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I'll definitely come back on and let everyone know how things went.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, folks. Josh puts a lot of work in. I mean, he has kept the tradition of Dallas alive for many years. Hocus pocus, you name it. He's always involved, and he's always looking, to give fans everywhere the best possible, events, research, everything, because he just loves Dallas. He loves TV, the 80s, the 90s, you name it. That's Josh, and he's a great human being. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi. He's Josh Eilberg, saying good night, everyone.
Good night.